Chapter 1: The King's Burden. The metallic tang of boredom was a poison Kian knew well. And the Duchy of Blackwood requires immediate confirmation of your attendance, Your Majesty. Royal Advisor Cashin's voice, smooth and polished as river stone, dragged on. Cashin's scent, a cloying, expensive blend of loyalty and cold, self-serving ambition, felt like a physical weight in the small, oppressive office. In fact, that scent was the true measure of the man, and it told Kian everything he needed to know about the political game being played. Kian didn't look up from the sprawling map of the Northern Territories. Still, his fingers traced the line of a crumbling border fortress, finding more truth in the geopolitical stress points than in Cashin's entire monologue. He shifted in the heavy leather chair, and the slight movement, a gesture of alpha impatience, was enough to silence the advisor mid-sentence. Paramount, Cashin? Is that the prevailing sentiment, or merely the strongest? Kian's voice, a low rumble, filled the space. As the silence stretched, the air thickened with the pressure of unspoken power. He felt the advisor's sense spike with a flicker of annoyance, quickly masked. This man, always so careful, only confirmed Kian's deep cynicism. The prevailing sentiment is the strongest, Your Majesty, Cashin insisted, recovering quickly. Because of that, he leaned into the argument. This is a ceremony of power. The kingdom expects a demonstration of might, of rightful hierarchy. Every wolf's strength is measured in their influence, their pedigree, their scent. Kian finally met his eyes. Cashin was already cataloging suitable, strong-scented partners. More wolves who see the crown, never the man. Kian's entire life was spent surrounded by wolves whose worth was solely defined by genetics and status. To make things worse, the political pressure had never been higher. He was weary of it, a constant, suffocating blanket of expectation. Was there any genuine spirit left in his kingdom, or had tradition suffocated it all? I've heard enough of prevailing sentiments today, advisor. Kian rose, his movement unhurried but absolute. Instead of arguing the point, Kian chose deflection. My attendance is mandatory, but the manner of it is not your concern. Prepare the logistics for my arrival. Inform the council I will be observing the proceedings, personally. Cashin bowed, his obedience swift but his confusion, a faint, metallic tang of worry, was clear. Truth be told, Cashin was already worried about this tendency of Kian's to abandon the throne room for the streets, which threatened his own carefully constructed influence. What if the king found someone unsuitable? Kian moved toward the wardrobe where his disguise waited. As if pulled by a string, Kian found himself thinking about his grandfather, the old alpha, who once told him, a king who only smells velvet will never know the scent of his people's fear. He needed to feel the true pulse of the citadel. In that moment, Kian shed the heavy, embroidered coat and the scent of royalty, trading them for the simple wool of a minor pack guard. Next, he would walk through the grand hall undetected, searching for a single honest moment in a sea of lies. Chapter 2: Among the Wolves. The stench of ambition lingered even after the private door to the office clicked shut. Kian needed air, and he needed silence from the wolves who only spoke in calculated flattery. He navigated the perimeter of the grand hall, moving through shadows cast by massive obsidian columns. The scene was an assault on his senses, a thick, volatile soup of aggressive alpha musk, designer perfumes meant to mimic power, and the overwhelming, territorial sense of thousands of high-ranking wolves. More importantly, beneath the noise, he could detect the undercurrent of fear, the terror of not measuring up, the anxiety of social failure. This atmosphere, vast and glittering, felt less like a celebration and more like a beautifully constructed trap. Kian watched the spectacle. Wolves air-kissed, then immediately spun away, their eyes hunting for a higher-ranking target. He noticed how the powerful scents of the older pack leaders seemed to press down on the weaker scents, like a physical weight. It was a grotesque dance of status, Kian thought, feeling a wave of detached cynicism. Just like that, he was reminded why he hated these formal gatherings, because they stripped away genuine character, leaving only the hunger for power. His gaze swept over the crowd, dismissing the duplicity, searching for the anomaly. Meanwhile, his attention snagged on a figure near the rear, partially concealed by a garish arrangement of gilded flowers. She was small, wearing a simple dress that spoke of good quality but no wealth, and she looked desperately unwell. She wasn't engaging, she wasn't looking at the throne, she was looking at the cold, unforgiving stone of the pillar behind her, as if wishing she could melt into it. Not only that, but her entire posture radiated exhaustion and dread. Why was she here if she hated it so much? He began to move closer, drawn by a curiosity that felt primal, untainted by politics. With every step he took, his alpha perception focused like a laser. Her scent. It wasn't the strong, confident signature of a high-status wolf. It wasn't the sickly sweet smell of illness. It was almost nothing. It was barely there. A faint, clean, earthy note, like a single forgotten sprig of chamomile, layered with the metallic spike of raw terror. She didn't know what scared her more, the noise, the crowd, or the possibility of being noticed. Her scent was the most honest, unfiltered emotion he had encountered all night, because it was so weak it couldn't possibly be a lie. It was a truth she was trying desperately to hide. Why would someone hide something so easily dismissed? Under the weight of his stare, Kian closed the final gap, his own powerful sense still controlled, contained beneath his skin. This woman, who was actively trying to disappear, held his attention completely. Her heart skipped a beat as he moved past, but she did not look up. She simply leaned harder against the pillar, like a wilting flower stem. But then, the battle she was fighting internally became violently external. Chapter 3: The Collapse. Layla slid instantly. One moment, she was upright, a fragile fighter gripping the stone pillar, the next, she was a dizzying blur sinking toward the marble floor. Without warning, the noise of the ceremony faded to a dull roar in Kian's ears. He reacted by pure, untamed instinct, the speed of his alpha lineage, the protective drive of his core. In the span of a breath, Kian covered the distance, his strong arm sweeping around her waist, catching her before her skull could meet the unforgiving floor. Contact. Her body was light, almost insubstantial, completely slack with unconsciousness. The wool of his cloak scratched her cheek. The weak, clean scent he'd noticed now spiked with the smell of extreme fatigue, but still lacked any discernible rank or power. It was profoundly, innocently vulnerable. She felt it, clear as day, even in her unconscious state, the overwhelming, protective presence that shielded her from the chaos. Kian used his alpha aura to freeze the movement around them. He did not growl, he did not speak, he merely stood, radiating a silent command of absolute don't look. Because of that, no wolf dared to challenge his moment of authority, ensuring no one saw the king holding a fainting commoner. He adjusted his hold, lifting her fully into his arms. Which meant he bypassed the public infirmary immediately. Sending her to the public healers would expose her to the scrutiny of the court, the very scrutiny she feared and whose scent she hid. He wasn't doing that. Deep down, he knew the truth. He was protecting the only moment of genuine emotion he'd found all night, selfishly hoarding it. He carried her through a network of concealed servant passages. The space between them burned with an unfamiliar intensity. He noticed the delicate curve of her neck, the dark, tangled strands of hair against his simple cloak. He recognized the type of plain cotton dress she wore, the practical, durable clothing of working pack members, probably a healer, because her hands, though well cared for, had the subtle calluses of someone who worked with rough materials or applied consistent pressure. Who was she, this unscented shadow who had the audacity to collapse at the apex of the kingdom? As the wind shifted through the unused passage, Kian felt a shift within himself. His isolation, once a heavy shield, suddenly felt like a hollow shell. He carried the burden of his kingdom, and now he carried the physical weight of this fragile, mysterious woman. Eventually, he reached the discreet, heavily warded door to his private suite. He didn't knock. He simply passed the threshold. He placed her gently on the enormous, opulent bed, a ridiculous contrast to her humble clothing. Just like that, her simple presence irrevocably changed the most intimate, sacred space of the Alpha King. He watched her for a long time, the quiet rise and fall of her chest the only sound. He needed to confirm his suspicions, to understand why her lack of scent was the most honest thing in his world. Before she could move, he knew he wouldn't let her leave until he had the answer. Chapter 4: The Reveal. Fear. Raw, crystalline, and utterly genuine. It was the first thing Layla offered when her eyes fluttered open. Kian stood beside the opulent, four-poster bed. The king's private suite was silent, the thick velvet curtains muffling the last echoes of the court. He watched Layla stir, his senses focused entirely on her. Instead of the powerful, commanding aura he usually exerted, he kept his presence quiet, almost gentle, observing her initial disorientation. With a single glance, Layla's pupils dilated, reflecting the gilded ceiling and the silk canopy above her. She didn't recognize the room. Then, her eyes snapped to him. Kian was still in his stranger clothes, simple wool and leather, but his face, unmasked, was pure Alpha King Kian Aethelred. Her breath hitched, a small, broken sound. Her scent, the faint chamomile earth, spiked with pure, unadulterated terror. It was beautiful, the honesty of it. Where am I? Her voice was a dry, thin whisper. Kian remained still. Because of that, she couldn't interpret his silence, which only intensified her panic. You are in the citadel, healer, he answered softly, his tone neutral, authoritative. And you are safe. You collapsed in the grand hall. She sat up, clutching the unfamiliar silk sheets to her chest. As the silence roared, she looked wildly around the room, at the rich, hand-carved furniture, at the deep windows overlooking the inner courtyard, at the coat of arms subtly woven into the rug. She was trapped. She recognized the unique power signature of the wards on the windows, only the king's chambers possessed that level of security. No. No, this is, her eyes snapped back to him, finally processing his face, his size, the undeniable sense of absolute authority he held in check. Her heart skipped a beat, and her entire small body went rigid. You were the man, she stammered, scrambling back until the heavy pillows stopped her. The stranger. You're the king. Kian allowed himself a small, rare smile. Alpha King Kian Aethelred, yes. You remember. But I need to leave. Immediately. Layla threw off the covers, moving to swing her legs over the edge. Without thinking, she tried to flee. No. The single word, calm and low, was enough. He didn't use an alpha command, but the sheer weight of his authority was enough to pin her where she sat. She gasped, freezing halfway off the bed, her small healer's hands clutching the silk. What followed was a silence filled with the heavy thrum of Layla's frantic pulse. Kian took a step closer. He noted the way she instinctively tried to hide her neck, pulling her collar up. She knew her secret was a vulnerability here. You collapsed from severe exhaustion, Layla of Vane, Kian stated, using the name he'd pulled from her mandatory ceremonial tag. A minor pack. A healer. That scent cannot be fabricated. You are unwell, and this suite is the safest place in the Citadel for you to recover. The infirmary is crowded, and meanwhile, the healers there would ask questions that neither of us wish to answer. He saw the flicker of understanding and renewed terror in her eyes. She knew the political scandal her presence here represented. Deep down, she knew the truth. She couldn't risk the exposure of her scent to the judgmental eyes of the court healers. "Please, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice barely carrying. "I am fine. My absence will be noticed. My pack. Your pack will be informed you are in the care of the Citadel's most discreet medical staff, recovering from a terrible fever. I have seen to it." Kian dismissed her concerns with a single, elegant wave of his hand. As the air thickened with his resolve, he realized how much he enjoyed this small, intimate battle where he could wield his power for something honest. He walked to the heavy door leading to the outer chamber where his guards waited. Not only that, but he needed to ensure the space remained sealed. He stopped at the door, glancing back at the small woman who was now completely captive. "You will remain here, Layla. Until I say otherwise. Under my personal protection." He opened the door just enough to relay his orders to the guard captain. "No one enters. No one is told the name of my guest. We are alone." The tension broke as he closed the door, plunging them back into silence. He turned back to Layla, who was sitting bolt upright on the edge of the bed, her whole body trembling like a harp string drawn too tight. She was an unsuitable commoner, hidden away in the most intimate space of the most powerful man in the world. What secrets would this forced proximity unveil? Chapter 5: The Quiet Negotiation. Layla hadn't moved. She was still perched on the edge of the royal bed, her fear scent muted now by a kind of numb, self-preservatory shock. Kian poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal carafe, moving with a deliberate slowness meant to soothe the frantic rhythm of her pulse. Despite that, he knew the calming effect was minimal. He walked over and offered her a glass. She recoiled slightly, eyes wide. I don't need it. Thank you, Your Majesty." "You are thirsty, Layla." Kian's voice was firm. He didn't order her, but he held the glass steady. "You have been unconscious for hours. Dehydration will worsen your symptoms. I am not asking, I am observing your needs." She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of openly defying the Alpha King, or the intimacy of him noting her physical state. Finally, she took the glass, her fingers barely brushing his. The brief, warm contact sent a curious spark up Kian's arm, a tiny, surprising deviation from his usual controlled temperature. "I truly must go," she started again, sipping the water nervously. After swallowing, she pushed her hair back from her face. Her voice was stronger now, though still laced with desperation. "The scandal, it would be immense. For you. The Council demands strength, and harboring an unscented wolf, a common healer, in your private chambers, it will only cause weakness." Kian sat on a velvet chaise near the foot of the bed, creating a respectful but undeniable space between them. Meanwhile, he watched her face, searching for a trace of political maneuvering, but found none. Her concern was genuine, but it was for him, for his status, not for her own gain. "The Council demands what they think they are due," Kian countered, leaning forward. As if fate demanded it, he spoke the truth that fueled his core struggle. "They demand control. But this is my chamber. My sanctuary. My rules. He paused, letting his gaze capture hers. You are the first person in this entire citadel whose initial reaction to seeing me was fear, followed immediately by concern for my political standing. Because of that, you are the most honest wolf I have met in years. Layla's world tilted. She stared at him, unable to comprehend this logic. Honesty in fear? What's worse, she still didn't try to use this opportunity to demand wealth or privilege. She simply wanted to escape. This confirmed his initial observation: she was not an opportunist. She was a sacrifice, self-sacrificing, loyal, and hiding a defect she saw as a weakness. I just want to return to my pack, she whispered, her eyes pleading. I can send a message. I am a healer, Your Majesty, I am needed. You are needed here, Kian stated, his voice low and firm. But then, he softened his stance, shifting the conflict from authority to curiosity. Tell me about your scent, Layla of Vane. It is faint, but clean. Why do you fear its exposure so fiercely? Why is its silence so important to you? Layla inhaled sharply. That was the crucial question, the secret she guarded most closely. Her voice trembled as she tried to form a denial, but the intense, magnetic pull of the alpha's stare was too much. It is a defect. A shame, she choked out, looking down at her hands. The moment their eyes locked, Kian saw the profound internalized shame she carried. Kian stood, the glass of water heavy in his hand, his initial fascination hardening into protective resolve. Soon after, he had to leave the chamber to deal with the inevitable inquiries his advisor would initiate. He needed to prepare the political battlefield. Rest, Layla. Your shame, as you call it, is intriguing. It is honest. And here, in my chamber, honesty is the only strength that matters. He set the glass down. Before he could move, he watched the fear in her eyes turn to utter confusion. Kian needed to deal with the political sharks outside before they could sniff the blood in his private waters. Chapter 6: Establishing the Cage. The advisor, Cashin, was waiting in Kian's outer receiving room. He wasn't waiting patiently either, his scent was sharp with irritation and strained deference. Your Majesty. I apologize for the intrusion, but my duties demanded an immediate inquiry. Cashin spoke quickly. After the confrontation in the Grand Hall, the whispers started immediately. The incident caused considerable speculation. Protocol dictates. Protocol dictates nothing of my private space, Cashin. Kian cut him off, his voice flat. He walked straight to his own desk, refusing to give the advisor the advantage of a seated audience. The woman was suffering from a critical fever. I moved her immediately to my private care to prevent the spread of illness and the ensuing panic that a public collapse would cause. Not only that, but Kian lied easily, weaving a necessary fiction. He used the very fear the court fostered, the fear of vulnerability and contagion, to protect Layla. A fever? Cashin sniffed the air, subtly trying to detect any lingering infection scent, but Kian's control was absolute. Even so, Cashin pressed the core concern: and her identity, Your Majesty? Her rank must be established for the record. For the protection of the crown. Her rank is irrelevant. She is under my care. Kian fixed the advisor with a cold, unwavering gaze. As if the forest watched, he felt the pressure of his ancestry demanding he defend this small, honest creature. She is a healer. She will remain under quarantine until I deem the threat of contagion past. Cashin's scent flashed with annoyance again, quickly replaced by a saccharine submission. Despite that, Kian could read the warning beneath the polished veneer: I will find out who she is, and why she is worth this risk. Of course, Your Majesty. Your diligence is admirable. Cashin bowed, but the subtle hostility in his voice was a clear threat. The tension broke only when Cashin finally exited, leaving Kian alone to contemplate the political chess move he just made. He returned to the private suite. Layla was no longer on the bed. Instead, she was standing by the heavy curtains, gazing out at the inner courtyard where guards patrolled. She looked like a caged bird. "You have deflected them," she said quietly, turning to face him. "But you lied. You said it was a fever. They will eventually demand proof of recovery. They will demand what I choose to give them, Layla." Kian leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. From there, he established a new reality. "You are trapped, but you are safe from them. This suite is a cage, yes, but it is my cage. They cannot touch you here." As the bond pulsed between the powerful alpha and the vulnerable healer, Kian spoke the rules. "I need you to recover, and I need you to answer my questions. In exchange, I will keep your shame a secret from a court that would destroy you for it. This is not kindness, Layla. This is a transaction." Maybe it was fate that brought him the only honest wolf in the kingdom, because now Kian had a project, an honesty he intended to study and protect. Layla nodded slowly, the realization of her new, isolated reality settling over her. Her thoughts spun with the impossibility of her situation. She was a political prisoner in the heart of the kingdom. Yet, she knew the king spoke the truth. Outside those walls, she would be ruined. "Very well, Your Majesty," she murmured, accepting the confines of her golden cage. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the immense sacrifice of her freedom. "I will stay. Until you deem me recovered." Kian felt a dark, satisfying sense of possession settle over him. The cage was set. What followed was the start of a deep, dangerous proximity that neither of them could foresee. Chapter 7, Breakfast in Solitude. The smell of black coffee and fresh berries was a stark contrast to the sterile fear that clung to the air. Kian watched Layla across the expanse of the breakfast table. Come morning, the room, usually his haven of isolation, felt crowded, the air thick with unspoken tension. He was meticulously dressed, radiating quiet power. Layla, wearing one of his hastily provided, oversized cashmere robes, looked tiny and fragile. Instead of greeting him, she kept her focus fixed on the antique silver spoon she held, avoiding his gaze with a practiced intensity that spoke of years of self-effacement. Kian's goal: observe her habits, gauge her true level of exhaustion, and test the sincerity of her acceptance. Internal state: patient curiosity, tinged with a detached scientific interest in her anomaly. "Eat, Layla," Kian ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "You need sustenance." That collapse was not merely fatigue, it was the body's absolute rebellion against neglect. "I saw your pack manifest. They work you to exhaustion, don't they?" She flinched at the accuracy of his guess, a subtle shift in her scent betraying the spike of anxiety. With every heartbeat, Kian felt the draw of her silent presence. "I am useful there, Your Majesty." "That is my purpose," she finally replied, her voice soft, almost swallowed by the huge room. She picked at a berry, avoiding the rich, savory meats. "Purpose," Kian repeated, rolling the word over his tongue, finding it bitter. That's why he felt such disdain for the court, because they reduced life to a single, political purpose. "Tell me, Layla. Do you ever eat for pleasure, or only for function?" Her chest ached at the simple, challenging question. Pleasure? It was a foreign concept. In the quiet that followed, she took a careful bite of toast, chewing slowly. "Pleasure is a luxury few can afford, King Kian. And fewer still, those of us without great influence." As the truth unraveled, she spoke honestly, unknowingly touching the core of Kian's own isolation. He, too, felt his life was governed only by function. She didn't know what scared her more, that he understood her life of sacrifice, or that he was demanding she acknowledge a desire beyond duty. Moments later, a servant entered silently to refresh the coffee. Kian watched Layla's posture tighten instantly, her shoulders hunching, her head bowing slightly in the presence of someone of higher rank. Even a palace servant had more standing than her unscented self. Because of that, Kian noticed her anxiety scent momentarily dim, suggesting her composure was easier to maintain with a stranger than with him. "You are recovering, but still operating on fumes," Kian concluded, rising abruptly. Before he could speak about his departure, he walked to the window, watching the movement of the guards below. "You will remain here. You will rest. I have pressing duties, but you are not to leave this suite. Consider yourself an essential possession." The word possession hung in the air, cold and dismissive, but Layla seemed to take comfort in the clarity of the command. As if summoned, his advisor's scent, a stale cigar and political maneuvering, drifted faintly on the morning breeze from the courtyard below. Kian needed to leave before the court noticed the sudden, strange stability of the Alpha's usually restless aura. Next, Kian would find out just how much pressure the court was exerting on his authority. Chapter 8: Contrasting Worlds. The Duke of Silverwood smelled like old money and damp ambition. Kian returned to his suite hours later, his mind numb from a sterile meeting where every syllable had been crafted to flatter and extract advantage. By the time he dismissed his guards and entered his private haven, the crushing weight of the crown felt like a literal migraine. He stripped off his formal tunic, the heavy silk falling to the floor, and ran a hand roughly through his dark hair. The scent of the Duke's calculating deference clung to his skin, repulsive and thick. He needed cleansing. Kian's goal: seek a moment of genuine quiet, find reprieve from the toxic political noise. Internal state: frustration, exhaustion, and a sudden, quiet longing for the unscented honesty of his captive. He stopped in the doorway to the main salon. Layla wasn't visible, but the room was different. His massive, disorderly collection of historical and military texts, which he often left strewn haphazardly, had been meticulously organized. The scattered books were now neatly stacked by size and subject. A stray quill Kian had left on the floor was placed precisely on the inkstand. He didn't know what scared her more, the sheer waste of free time, or the impulse to impose order on a space that was not hers. But then, Kian realized what it was: an instinctive need to serve, not through duty, but through simple, tangible acts of healing and order. It was a compulsion, a way to ground herself. In that moment, Kian felt a wave of profound relief wash away the frustration of the Duke's political stench. Her simple presence was a counteragent to the court's poison. He found Layla by the small fireplace, quietly examining the intricate pattern of a tapestry. She didn't jump, but her scent flared slightly, the timid chamomile note acknowledging his return. "Did you organize my books?" he asked, the question devoid of accusation. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." It was an involuntary act, Layla murmured, turning back to the tapestry. She felt it, clear as day, the potential offense she caused by overstepping her bounds. "I am a healer. Disorder, it becomes a kind of pain. I felt the need to fix the immediate chaos." "Chaos?" Kian chuckled, a deep, rich sound he rarely allowed in the Citadel. That's why her actions mattered so much, they were so simple, so human. That room has been in chaos for centuries. You fixed it in an hour. Kian's goal: dig deeper into her life and motivations, contrasting her simple worth with the court's perceived worth. Stakes: personal. He risks revealing his own vulnerability by asking personal questions. He moved closer, his alpha sense still controlled, but now softened with genuine curiosity. "You are a healer of the body, Layla. But you organize books. You mend chaos." He sat on the edge of the fireplace hearth. "Tell me about your pack." Where does a wolf with such quiet capabilities find her place? Her breath caught as he lowered himself to her level. As the silence stretched, she slowly turned away from the tapestry, meeting his eyes for the first time without immediate panic. I am from the Willow Creek Pack. A small, non-territorial pack. We serve the local villages. I learned healing from my grandmother. My value has always been tied to my usefulness, which is why the collapse in the Grand Hall was a failure of duty. Not only that, but Kian saw the pain in her eyes, the genuine belief that her worth was conditional. It was a mirror of his own isolation, the king whose worth was conditional on his power. Next, he would have to use his power to protect this valuable honesty when the court inevitably came sniffing. Chapter 9, The First Test. The sudden, aggressive smell of the royal advisor, Cassian, sliced through the suite's calm like a blade. Layla's entire body went taut, her scent spiking sharply, pure, panicked fear. Without warning, a powerful alpha pulse of his own scent, protective dominance, flared from Kian, instantly caging Layla within his personal sphere. Stay behind me, Kian ordered, his voice shifting instantly from quiet confidant to the absolute ruler. In that moment, the two worlds collided, the intimate haven and the brutal political reality. Your Majesty. Forgive the intrusion, but your security detail insisted this was urgent, Cassian's voice called from the closed entrance to the suite. The door remained closed, but the urgency in his controlled voice, paired with the faint scent of malice, confirmed the threat. Kian's goal: defend Layla without revealing her identity or rank, using maximum alpha authority to deter the antagonist. Internal state: protective anger, the rage of a private moment being invaded. Kian walked to the inner door, standing directly in front of it. Speak your concern, Cassian. And keep your voice low. The patient requires quiet. It's about the fever, sir, Cassian said smoothly. But then, the true intention emerged. The Council of Elders is convening an emergency session tomorrow concerning security protocols. They require the name, rank, and family of the individual under quarantine. For the records of contagion, of course. The emphasis on records was a thinly veiled demand for Layla's scent ranking. Layla's heart skipped a beat behind Kian. She knew that question was a death sentence for her secret. Kian could feel her small, trembling hand instinctively clutch the fabric of his cashmere robe. The identity of my guest is classified under royal prerogative, Cassian, Kian stated, keeping his tone flat, dangerously calm. As the air thickened, his suppressed alpha rage was palpable. Because of that, the air itself felt heavy, making Cassian's breath shallow. The fever is severe, but contained. The threat is not contagion, but your disrespect for my express orders. He heard Cassian swallow hard. What followed was a calculated retreat. My sincerest apologies, Your Majesty. I only sought to fulfill the Elders' request. The Elders report to me, advisor. I do not report to them. Kian waited until the faint, defeated scent of the advisor finally withdrew from the outer chamber. He turned slowly. Layla was pale, leaning against the wall, but she was intact. Her breath caught as she met his intense gaze. They know I am low-ranked, she whispered, fear still heavy in her voice. They know my scent is weak. They will not stop. Kian pushed away from the door, closing the final distance between them. Without another word, he stepped into her space. He reached out and gently rested his thumb against the frantic pulse point in her neck, right above the collar where she always hid her scent glands. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Kian spoke, his voice dropping to a promise and a threat. I am the Alpha King, Layla. When I choose to protect something, the entire world stops challenging it. He was no longer the aloof ruler. He was the possessive protector. This was a major success for their bond, forging trust under fire, and just like that, everything changed. Next, their forced intimacy would deepen as the court's political pressure mounted, forcing Kian to make a definitive commitment. Chapter 10: An Intimate Breach. The tension from the advisor's challenge had settled, leaving a hollow ache behind Kian's eyes. He had returned to his desk, trying to process trade agreements, but the cold political scent of the documents only worsened the heavy pressure building at his temples. It was an old affliction, the Alpha King's headache, born of constant scrutiny and the suppression of his own power. He rarely spoke of it. Kian's goal: cope with the stress and political backlash without showing weakness. Internal state: painful suppression, deep frustration with the crown's limitations. Layla was sitting quietly by the fireplace, reading one of the history texts she had organized. She was still afraid, her scent thin, yet now it was overlaid with a new, subtle note: profound empathy. She rose slowly, crossing the vast room with a quiet grace. Kian didn't look up, but his hypersensitive hearing tracked the soft whisper of the cashmere robe against the rug. "Your Majesty," Layla murmured, her voice laced with certainty. She felt it, clear as day, the dull, rhythmic pain vibrating off his body. "Your head aches. You are trying to hide it, but the pressure is radiating off you." Kian paused, quill mid-sentence. Despite that, he frowned, annoyed that his carefully maintained control had been breached by this quiet woman. "My health is not your concern, Layla. It is a minor distraction." "No," she insisted gently, approaching the desk. In the echo of his voice, she detected the falseness of his claim. "Distractions can be ignored. Pain must be healed. This is not a distraction, but a drain on your strength." Kian's goal: submit to her care, trusting her intuitive skill. Internal state: vulnerability, exhaustion, and a sudden, desperate need for relief. Stakes: personal: he risks revealing his own physical frailty, the one thing the court must never see. He slowly lowered the quill. Without another word, he gestured curtly toward the empty chair opposite him. Layla approached with reverence, yet without fear. As if fate demanded it, she took his surrender as a professional obligation. She didn't touch him immediately. She stood behind him, placing her hands a careful inch above his temples. Then she began. She didn't use any herbal scents or elaborate chants. It was pure intuitive healing. Her hands hovered, warm and steady, and Kian felt the pressure in his skull begin to draw outward, drawn by the quiet, magnetic pulse of her energy. The air thickened around them, no longer with alpha rage, but with pure, focused concentration. Her faint scent, the chamomile and earth, seemed to expand, wrapping around him like a soothing balm. She is strong. Terribly strong, Kian realized, his thoughts slowing. Because of that, her power was completely non-physical, non-political, and entirely genuine. It was the purest form of worth he had ever encountered. Layla's fingers finally rested on his neck, pressing lightly into the tension knots. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Kian felt a powerful sense of comfort he hadn't experienced since childhood. Her voice trembled slightly, a low hum as she focused. "You carry the fear of the kingdom, Your Majesty. It settles here, at the base of your command. Release it." After what felt like an age, the pain lifted, not with a sudden pop, but like a tide receding. Kian inhaled deeply, turning in his chair to face her. He didn't know what scared him more, the pain, or the realization that she now knew his weakness better than his own guards. Next, Kian would be forced to reveal his own hidden pain, reacting to the intimacy of her care. Chapter 11: The Truth of the Crown, Midpoint Shift. A profound silence filled the room, heavy with the residue of their shared vulnerability. Kian looked at Layla, her eyes still soft with the lingering glow of her healing focus. She felt it, clear as day, the emotional openness that replaced the physical tension. No wolf has ever been able to do that, Kian stated, his voice raspy. In the quiet that followed, he reached up and gently took her hands, pulling them away from his face. Her hands were small, cool, and surprisingly strong. Kian's goal: share his hidden burden and acknowledge her worth. Internal state: exposed, reflective, and driven by a desperate need to trust someone. My power, my scent, Kian began, his eyes locking onto hers. With every heartbeat, he knew he was breaking an essential rule of monarchy. It is constant. It is control. I cannot turn it off. I cannot trust any emotion directed at me, because it is always filtered through the weight of my title, my lineage, my scent. He squeezed her hands once, briefly. That is why I wear the disguise. To smell honesty. To find a true moment. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. While the forest held its breath outside the thick walls, Kian confessed his deepest truth. When you collapsed, Layla, and your sense spiked with pure, unadulterated terror, it was the most honest, genuine reaction I have had in this citadel. Your fear, paradoxically, is your strength. As the truth unraveled, Layla's eyes widened with shock, seeing the king's own profound isolation laid bare. Just like that, everything changed. The dynamic shifted from captor/guest to two lonely souls connected by the burden of their roles. You hate the throne, Layla whispered, finally understanding his cynicism. I hate the lies that surround it, Kian corrected. That's why her presence was so vital. She was a beacon of truth. And you are the only one who does not lie to me, not even with your breath. Your shame about your scent, your fear, your simple desire to organize books, it is all real. And that makes you more powerful than any scented duke. Not only that, but Kian knew this was the point of no return. He had committed to valuing her true power over the court's perceived worth. The intimate moment shattered suddenly. The outer door to the receiving room opened with a muted thud. Without warning, a guard, unauthorized to approach, rushed toward the inner door. Your Majesty! Forgive me! A secret messenger, from the elders, the guard stammered, his scent raw with panic and political fear. What followed was the clear scent of trouble. Next, Kian would have to deal with the inevitable political countermove, raising the stakes dramatically. Chapter 12, Political Countermove. The messenger's words were a bucket of cold water on the flame of their intimacy. Speak only what I permit, guard. Kian released Layla's hands, his face hardening instantly back into the mask of the king. As the wind shifted, his powerful alpha sense surged, sharp and commanding, instantly silencing the trembling guard. Kian's goal: take immediate, decisive control of the escalating political fallout. Internal state: cold anger, focused protection, and the realization that Cassian was escalating the silent war. The message, sir, the guard stammered, shoving a heavily sealed scroll forward. It states the elders suspect the king is harboring someone unsuitable and unvetted within the private chambers, potentially compromising royal security. Unsuitable. Cassian's careful wording. He was using the language of security to mask his attack on Layla's rank and Kian's judgment. Kian seized the scroll, crushing the wax seal without bothering to read the contents. Because of that, he knew the scroll was merely justification for the act, not the core threat itself. Who sent you? Kian demanded, his golden eyes blazing. In the echo of his voice, the air cracked with alpha authority. Advisor Cassian, Your Majesty. He said to report back on the status of the woman under quarantine immediately. Report this back to Cassian, Kian commanded, his voice glacial. With a single glance, he decimated the guard's composure. Tell him he is one step closer to losing his head. I did not request an inquiry, and I did not authorize an access point to this floor. He issued new, severe orders to the guard. Next, he turned to the door, sealing it with a physical gesture that engaged the strongest inner wards. The room shuddered slightly. What's worse, he knew the guard would report every detail of the king's uncontrolled rage, further cementing the council's belief that Layla was a dangerous, volatile influence. He didn't know what scared her more, the silent threat of the elders, or the spectacular display of the king's power unleashed to protect her. Layla was watching him, her face reflecting her immense fear, but also a new, dawning sense of awe. "You are now in more danger than ever before," Kian stated, the cold truth heavy between them. Her world tilted. "I have just openly defied the elders and challenged Cashin's authority for you. This is no longer merely a private quarantine. It is a political siege." He walked back to her, his movements predatory and resolved. As if the world narrowed to just the two of them, he lowered his voice. "You are not going anywhere, Layla. Your safety is now inextricably tied to my ability to defy them. But then, they will not attack your rank. They will attack me. And I will not allow it." Next, Kian would escalate the intimacy, sealing their commitment just as the political pressure reached its peak. Chapter 13, An Act of Defiance. Kian stood at the window, the cold citadel stone pressing against his palm. Layla's fear, though persistent, was now overshadowed by a fragile new scent, trust. "They will not stop," Layla said quietly, having followed him to the window. She didn't know what scared her more, the political threats, or the intensity of the Alpha King's commitment. "Your Majesty, this must end. My weak scent, it is too high a price for your crown. Let me leave. I can disappear back into my pack." Kian's goal, affirm his commitment to her and seal their alliance, openly defying the expectations of the court. Internal state, driven, resolute, and willing to take the ultimate risk for the sake of honesty. Kian turned, his golden eyes blazing with conviction. Before he could speak, he walked toward the secure jewel box built into the wall, ignoring her plea. "Your worth is not measured by the strength of your scent, but by the integrity of your spirit, Layla." He accessed the box, retrieving a small, heavy silver locket etched with the ancient Aethelred crest, a snarling wolf's head beneath a simple crown. This was no common jewelry, it was a deeply personal symbol, usually reserved for the queen. He held it out to her. "This locket was worn by my mother. It is a symbol of my lineage's commitment, not to power, but to protection." Layla stared at the silver, her breath catching. Her heart skipped a beat, not from the value of the heirloom, but from the terrifying implication of the gesture. "I cannot accept this, Your Majesty," she whispered, pulling her hands back. Her voice trembled with refusal. "This is a declaration. This is a challenge to the entire council. They will see this as treason, that you would give a symbol of the crown to someone, unscented. Let them see it." Kian stepped closer, his large hands closing gently around her small ones, placing the cold weight of the silver in her palm. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the metal seemed to warm immediately. Just like that, Kian made his commitment public, or as public as it could be within his private sphere. "They demanded a traditional measure of worth for the person I harbor. This is my answer." Kian's gaze was commanding. "You are wearing the symbol of my protection. You are wearing the future of my kingdom. Because of that, you are no longer just Layla, the healer. You are mine to defend." This was an act of defiance, the point of no return for Kian. He had staked his reign on her. What followed was the scent of pure, unadulterated resolve flowing off him, replacing the earlier protective dominance. Layla was trapped, now, not by the lock on the door, but by the love and loyalty of the Alpha King. As the air thickened with the magnitude of the commitment, a harsh, insistent thudding echoed from the outer receiving chamber. Without warning, the sound of multiple heavy footsteps confirmed their worst fears. Royal delegation demanding an audience with His Majesty regarding protocol breaches, a guard's voice boomed, thick with manufactured urgency. Next, the political siege would become a direct, personal confrontation. Chapter 14, The Court's Challenge. Kian's eyes narrowed, instantly cold and calculating. He didn't touch the locket Layla still clutched, but his gaze commanded her to hold it tight. Stay here. Kian's command was low, absolute. He swept from the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Layla instinctively followed, stopping just inside the doorway, hidden but listening. Kian found Advisor Cassian standing in the receiving room, flanked by two elder wolves, a duke of immense wealth and the head of Citadel security. Instead of deferring, Cassian smelled of righteous indignation. Your Majesty, Cassian began, his voice dripping with faux concern. We have no choice but to convene this delegation. The defiance of the king's authority is unprecedented. We must discuss the continued presence of the unidentified woman. Kian's goal, assert his authority and prevent Layla's identity from being exposed by sheer force of will. Internal state, defensive, tense, and prepared for battle. You are questioning my royal prerogative in my own home, advisor? Kian challenged, his voice dangerously soft. As the silence roared, the sheer power of Kian's alpha authority made the elder duke shift uncomfortably. We are questioning the king's judgment, the elder duke, an older wolf named Torvin, piped up, his scent thick with traditionalism. Not only that, but Torvin represented the wealthiest and most conservative factions of the kingdom. That woman's collapse, your protective rage, it suggests an unsuitable influence is clouding your mind. Stakes, personal Kian risked a council vote against him, a move that could lead to his eventual deposition if he appeared unstable. I have already established she is a healer under quarantine for a fever. And yet, she remains sequestered for weeks. Cassian seized the opening, his scent momentarily victorious. Because of that, we require a formal account of her background. Her rank. Her scent designation. The kingdom needs assurance that her health, and her influence, pose no threat to the Aethelred line. The term scent designation was the trap. It was the formal, ancient term for the genetic ranking of a wolf's scent. It would expose Layla's defect instantly. Layla, hearing the demand from the doorway, inhaled sharply. She knew that word. Deep down, she knew the truth. The second they tried to scent rank her, she would be ruined. Kian looked over the heads of the delegation, his eyes finding the shadow of Layla in the inner doorway. Even so, he saw her desperate pallor, her fear. I will not subject any guest of mine to such an archaic, humiliating formality, Kian declared, his voice ringing with finality. The tension broke only to be replaced by a furious undercurrent of resentment from the delegation. Next, the advisor would deliver the final, most dangerous challenge, forcing Kian into an ultimate display of commitment. Chapter 15, The Sense of Fear and Rage. Cassian stepped forward, his polished facade cracking. After Kian's declaration, the advisor's scent spiked with a sharp, ugly note of genuine, political malice. Then you leave us no choice, Your Majesty. We must verify her identity by traditional means, here and now. Cassian turned slightly toward the inner door where Layla stood. As if fate demanded it, he spoke the words that would trigger the emotional climax. Let the woman present herself, King Kian. Let us witness her true worth. Layla's composure shattered. Without another word, her terror spilled out. Her unique chamomile earth scent, usually faint, spiked into a raw, self-conscious wave of blinding fear, fear of exposure, fear of the ruin she would cause Kian. It was so intense, so vulnerable, it hit Kian like a physical blow. Kian's goal, protect Layla from exposure at the cost of his own political stability. Internal state, overwhelming fury and protective panic, his alpha control breaking. Kian didn't speak. He didn't order. He simply reacted. A terrifying, uncontrolled alpha rage surged out of him, a raw, primal wave of power Kian hadn't displayed since he took the throne. It was the scent of absolute, untamed fury. The air around him seemed to darken and vibrate. The sheer force of his alpha aura slammed into the three delegates. Cassian gasped, clutching his chest, his scent turning instantly from malice to debilitating submission. The elder Duke Torvin fell backward, hitting the wall with a grunt. The head of security instinctively dropped to one knee. Because of that, no one could move, no one could speak. Her wolf pressed forward against the rage. Layla's only reaction was to clutch the silver locket beneath the robe. In the span of a breath, Kian had chosen her over the council. Kian's voice, when it came, was a low, seismic growl, not human, but pure wolf. You will never question my choices. You will never threaten the person I protect. You will never trespass in this chamber again. As the silence roared, Kian held the delegates captive in his rage, forcing them to scent the price of their political maneuvering. He had revealed his deep emotional investment and his volatile nature, creating a political catastrophe, but successfully shielding Layla. With every step he took, Kian advanced until his face was inches from the terrified Cassian. You are dismissed. Tell the elders they have challenged their king, and they have failed. The delegation stumbled backward, escaping as fast as their fear would allow. Kian stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his powerful scent slowly receding, leaving the air heavy with the aftermath of primal power. Next, Kian would find out the terrible consequences of his rage, and Layla would be forced to make her own painful choice. Chapter 16: The Political Fallout. Kian's rage receded, leaving behind a cold, desolate clarity. The silence in the receiving chamber was thick with the scent of political ruin. Immediately after the delegates fled, the heavy outer door slammed shut. Kian stood alone, his heart pounding a savage rhythm against his ribs. He felt exhausted, not from the exertion of the rage, but from the terrifying lack of control it represented. Kian's goal: try to mitigate the political damage he just caused. Internal state: frustrated, politically trapped, realizing his raw power had been ineffective against the force of tradition. He stalked back to his desk, grabbing a discarded scroll. Instead of calm, he found his thoughts racing. The sheer, public display of my alpha rage, it will be framed as instability. He had played directly into Cassian's hand. That's why the advisor's scent had been so triumphant beneath the fear. He had the ammunition he needed. But then, a faint, sickly scent drifted from the outer chamber, interrupting his calculations. Kian inhaled sharply. It was the residue of Cassian's malice, a thin, lingering thread of triumph. The scent of the advisor's confidence was far more dangerous than the scent of his fear. He didn't need to see Layla's scent ranking, my reaction told him everything. Kian ran a hand over his face. In the quiet that followed, he knew Cassian would move quickly to convene the Council of Elders, framing Kian's defense of the unsuitable woman as a dangerous, volatile, and irresponsible act. He realized his raw power was useless against the suffocating force of public opinion. He needed Layla. He needed the simple, quiet honesty of her presence to anchor him. As if pulled by a string, Kian strode toward the inner door. He needed to apologize for the frightening display of rage and reassure her that his promise of protection still stood, even at this extreme cost. Next, he would find the empty chamber and confront the terrible finality of her sacrifice. Chapter 17: The Empty Chamber. He pushed the door open, his gaze sweeping the familiar refuge of the suite. The air was different. The rich, calming scent of his favorite teakwood and leather was there, but the soft, earthy scent of chamomile and profound empathy was gone. Vanished. Kian froze. Her heart skipped a beat, but it was his own heart echoing the panic. He moved quickly, wildly, through the rooms. The bed was neatly made. Her few belongings were gone. His breath hitched when he reached the desk. Placed precisely on his pillow was the ancient, silver Aethelred locket he had given her only hours before. It gleamed under the lamplight, a cold, painful repudiation of his commitment. In the echo of his voice, he cursed his own arrogance. Beside it lay a small, folded piece of parchment. Kian tore it open, the movement savage. Layla's writing was small, elegant, and heartbreakingly final. Your Majesty. You showed them your power, and I saw the cost. Your devotion to me is what they will use to divide the kingdom. I cannot be the reason for your reign to weaken. I am a weakness. A burden. This symbol is too much weight for a common healer to carry. I must leave before the council can strip you of your power because of my defect. My shame is mine to carry. Your crown is yours to protect. Forgive me. Kian's goal, find Layla immediately. Internal state, betrayal, not by her, but by the outcome of his own actions, and crushing finality. Impact on arc, lowest point he confronts his greatest fear, that his attempt at genuine connection ultimately caused harm and reinforced her belief that she was a burden. A low, guttural growl rose in his throat, pure alpha distress. The tension broke into sharp, stabbing pain. Layla hadn't run from the threat of the council, she had run from the consequences to him. He crushed the note in his fist. Without thinking, he dropped to the floor, leaning on the base of the bed. He used his alpha's perception, not to track a physical enemy, but to find a trace of sorrow, of guilt, of herself. The scent was faint, almost imperceptible to any other wolf, a thin, watery trail of sorrow and self-condemnation, leading not to the outer chambers, but through the service door he rarely used, the door that led to the maze of maintenance corridors. Next, Kian would be forced into a dark night of the soul, tracking her through the cold, hidden heart of the citadel. Chapter 18, The Dark Night of the Soul. The service corridors were a world away from the gilded halls. They smelled of dust, stale air, and the exhausted sweat of the low-ranked workers, the true heart of the citadel that the court ignored. Kian shed his expensive inner tunic, the action fueled by desperation. He ran, his royal boots pounding on the rough stone floor, following the ghost trail of Layla's faint scent. Kian's goal, find Layla before she vanishes into the outer city. Internal state, utter despairing resignation, realizing he failed her by trying to control her safety rather than trust her heart. The scent was fading quickly, lost in the confusing network of passageways. No matter how hard she tried to disappear, Kian was close, but not close enough. He was chasing a ghost, a decision driven by selfless fear. He felt it, clear as day, the crushing weight of his failure. He had seen her honesty, her simple worth, and yet he had tried to cage it, just as the court tried to cage him. He had acted like the king who dictates, not the man who connects. He collapsed against a cold, damp wall in a low-ceilinged passage, his breath ragged. With every heartbeat, he tasted the bitter failure. He had forced her to choose, and she chose her perceived defect over his promised protection, because his protection came with too high a cost. She didn't know what scared her more than being a burden to him, and Kian realized he had reinforced that fear with his massive display of possessive rage. Layla, he choked out, his voice raw, an agonizing sound in the dark. In the stillness that followed, Kian admitted his own truth. He needed her honesty more than his kingdom needed his political control. The silence of the corridors roared with his self-condemnation. All is lost. His attempt at genuine love had resulted in her sacrifice. But then, a faint sound pierced the despair. It was a soft, ragged moan, followed by a thin, new scent, blood, mixed immediately with the unmistakable, concentrated chamomile and earth of Layla's unique healing essence. The scent was not coming from the outer exit. It was coming from a small, dark storage closet nearby. Next, Kian would find the turning point, Layla's true strength, in the depths of her self-imposed exile. Chapter 19, The Wounded Servant, Internal Realization. The small, muffled sound was the sound of pain, quickly followed by the focused, potent fragrance of Layla's healing essence. Kian launched himself at the rough wooden closet door, ignoring the protests of the old, sticky hinges. As the silence roared in the tight space, the door burst inward. The scene inside was dim, lit only by a tiny maintenance lamp hanging precariously on a hook. Layla wasn't hiding, she was working. She was kneeling on the dusty floor beside a young stable hand, a low-ranked male wolf whose leg was viciously gashed, likely from a careless accident with a horse or machinery. The wound was deep, slick with fresh blood. Layla's face was drawn with exhaustion, but her focus was absolute. Her small, firm hands were pressed against the jagged injury, and her quiet, unique scent was almost vibrating with concentrated energy, her intuitive healing fully engaged. Kian's goal, reaffirm his belief in her worth and convince her to return, not as a subject, but as his partner. Internal state, renewed hope, profound shame for his controlling actions, and fierce determination. She looked up, her eyes wide, surprised by the sudden, powerful presence of the king. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't release the servant. "Your Majesty, please. I found him bleeding. He needs binding. I couldn't leave him." Kian knelt beside her. He didn't know what scared her more, the council's threat, or the sight of the king kneeling in the dust and blood. In that moment, Kian understood everything. "You ran to protect my crown," Kian stated, his voice low, raw with apology. But then, he gestured to the bleeding servant. "And yet, you stopped in the heart of your own crisis to heal a wolf who has nothing to offer you. You heal because it is who you are." He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. Layla's world tilted beneath his gaze. "I failed you, Layla," Kian confessed, the words tasting like ash. Because of that, he had to be completely honest. "I tried to protect you with my power, and that only proved to you that your worth was a liability. I didn't see your true power until this moment, not the king's political pawn, but the healer who mends chaos even when fleeing for her life." He looked directly into her eyes, which were wet with unshed tears. With every heartbeat, the connection deepened. "I am not asking you to return to my cage. I am asking you to return to my side. To stand with me, as a partner whose integrity is her strength." Layla's face crumpled, the truth of his acceptance finally breaking through her guilt. She felt it, clear as day, the shift from alpha protector to equal partner. After a few more minutes of intense focus, she finished the rough binding of the stable hand's leg. She stood, brushing the dust from the heavy, ill-fitting robe. "If I return, Your Majesty," Layla said, her voice small but suddenly resolute. Without another word, she accepted the challenge. "We do not hide. We go out and face the council now. The truth is all I have left." Next, their focus would shift entirely from quiet hiding to preparing for the final, public confrontation. Chapter 20, Formulating the Strategy. The scent of blood and fear was gone, replaced by the cool, clean air of the private suite. Kian and Layla returned to the suite, their energy focused, their alliance solidified by the crisis in the closet. Kian immediately ordered a fresh meal and a change of clothes for Layla, no longer as a pampered guest, but as an essential figure in a war room. Kian's goal, prepare Layla for the confrontation, use his power to amplify her truth. Internal state, focused, driven by Layla's quiet bravery. Impact on arc, Kian is now using his power to elevate honesty, not suppress fear. Kian paced the room, the alpha authority returning, but now tempered by a profound respect for the woman sitting calmly at his table. "Cashin and the elders expect me to be reeling, hiding you away, trying to negotiate a secret marriage to save face. Kian scoffed, recognizing their predictable political maneuvers. But then, we give them the unexpected, Layla countered, her eyes bright with determination. In the quiet that followed, she took a deliberate bite of fresh bread, eating for strength, not just survival. They will attack my scent. That is their only weapon. They will demand to know why an alpha king would choose a wolf whose scent is barely detectable, a wolf who, by their outdated measures, has no rank. And you will tell them the truth, Layla. Kian stopped pacing, looking at her with an intensity that promised victory. Because of that, he spoke his plan with absolute conviction. You will tell them that the scent of integrity is quiet. That the scent of service is subtle. That a wolf's true worth is not genetic, but intentional. She didn't know what scared her more, standing before the entire council, or the possibility of failure after Kian had risked everything. What followed was the sharp, decisive clack of Kian's hand hitting the table. I will bring the entire council of elders to the throne room in 1 hour. We will meet them head-on. You will speak, and I will enforce the value of what you say with the full weight of the crown. Not only that, but Kian knew this challenge could shatter his reign, but he also knew it was the only way to save the soul of his kingdom from the suffocating tradition of Cashin and the elders. With a single glance, Layla nodded, accepting the terrifying weight of her new role. Next, the two of them would face the gauntlet, walking from the private sanctuary to the public arena of the throne room. Chapter 21, The Approach. The journey from the suite to the throne room was short in distance but immense in consequence. Kian and Layla walked side by side, no longer hiding in the service corridors, but moving through the main, brightly lit halls of the citadel. The guards they passed snapped instantly to attention, their surprise palpable at the king's companion. Kian's goal, Project Absolute Unity and Confidence, ensuring Layla remains steady. Internal state, anticipation, profound respect for Layla's courage, and absolute, controlled resolve. Layla was wearing a simple, dark green dress Kian had pulled from his wardrobe for her, still too large, but neat. She felt it, clear as day, the terror of the court's impending judgment, but she walked with her spine straight, clutching the silver locket beneath the silk. Kian, for the first time, made no attempt to suppress Layla's nervous scent. He let the faint, anxious chamomile note be present. But then, he deliberately pushed his own scent, not the rage of the day before, but a thick, potent wave of absolute, unwavering resolve. His aura surrounded her, a palpable shield that said, "She is under my protection, and her fear does not negate her worth." As the bond pulsed between them, Layla glanced up. The sheer force of his confidence was infectious. She was still terrified, but she was standing next to the most powerful wolf in the world, and he was fighting for her truth. They reached the massive, carved doors of the throne room. The air was thick with expectation and the collective, aggressive scent of the assembled council, a potent, judgmental wave of tradition and suspicion. Kian paused at the threshold. He didn't know what scared her more, the elders waiting inside, or the moment he would release his power on them. Kian looked down at Layla, and for a final moment, his eyes softened from gold to warm honey. Before either could speak, he nodded once, a silent promise. Just like that, the heavy doors swung open, revealing the assembled political might of the kingdom, all eyes fixed on the king and the small, unscented woman by his side. Next, the final confrontation would begin, deciding the fate of Layla, Kian, and the entire kingdom. Chapter 22, The Climax. The throne room was a crucible of judgment. The elders, led by the stone-faced Duke Torvin, and the smug, waiting figure of advisor Cashin, stood assembled. Their combined sense, thick with power, skepticism, and tradition, hit Layla like a physical blow. She felt it, clear as day, the weight of centuries of protocol pressing down on her small frame. Kian and Layla walked the long marble aisle toward the dais, their steps slow and synchronized. Kian stood beside the massive, empty throne, placing Layla slightly ahead of him. As the silence roared, his alpha resolve scent pulsed, demanding obedience. Cashin stepped forward, smelling of false humility and controlled aggression. "Your Majesty, we appreciate your compliance. We must now proceed with the formal verification of this individual. We demand her scent designation to ensure the security of the Aethelred line." No, Kian's voice was the sound of bedrock cracking. Instead of silencing Layla, Kian deliberately addressed the council, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "You will listen to the one wolf in this room whose worth is not measured by her scent, but by her character." He gestured to Layla. But then, he stepped back, giving her the stage. Layla's goal: speak her truth and assert that integrity is the only true rank. Internal state: terrified, but anchored by Kian's trust and the need to protect his revolution. Layla took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping over the hostile faces. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with every word. "I am Layla of Willow Creek. My scent is weak, barely detectable. This is my truth, and I apologize for the inconvenience it causes your records." She looked directly at Cashin. "Not only that, but I am a healer. I mend bone, I soothe fevers, and I organize chaos." She spoke of her work, of rising before dawn, of service to the weakest in the villages. Because of that, her words were simple, honest, and utterly alien to the elders' ears. "Worth," she finished, meeting Duke Torvin's gaze, "is defined by what you do, not what you are given." Cashin laughed, a short, condescending sound. Admirable sentiment from a commoner. But the crown requires strength, not sentiment. He started to move toward her, reaching out as if to physically force a scent verification. This was the tipping point. Without warning, Kian's alpha power exploded. It wasn't the volatile rage of Act 5, but a crushing, targeted wave of absolute authority and finality. It did not smell of fury, it smelled of true kingship. He didn't touch Cashin. He merely willed him to stop. Cashin froze, mid-step, paralyzed by the sheer, undeniable force. "You," Kian growled, his voice vibrating with power, "are the threat to this kingdom. You measure worth by genetics, by how loudly a wolf can smell its power. You fill these halls with lies and flattery." Kian stepped to Layla's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. In the span of a breath, he made his final declaration. "Layla's scent is faint because her power is internal. She carries the integrity that this kingdom has forgotten." He lifted his voice, addressing the entire room. Just like that, everything changed. "I have chosen her. I have chosen honesty over tradition, service over swagger, and integrity over rank. Any wolf who challenges her worth, challenges mine." Torvin and the elders, seeing the unwavering power of their king, a power stronger than any political maneuver, slowly lowered their heads in submission. The tension broke. Kian had won. He had chosen love and truth, and his power had enforced that choice. Chapter 23, Falling Action, Immediate Consequences. The sound of silence and submission was deafening. Immediately after the elders bowed, Kian addressed the room, his voice still heavy with authority but now cool and decisive. He felt it, clear as day, the profound relief and exhaustion of having broken the cycle. Kian's goal: establish the new order and solidify Layla's official position. Internal state: relief, exhaustion, and firm resolve. Kian looked at Cashin, who was still trembling in his frozen posture. "Advisor Cashin, your loyalty is misguided. You will be relieved of all advisory duties. You will retain your rank, but your authority to govern and set protocol is revoked." Cashin stumbled back, his scent a mix of humiliation and lingering, impotent rage. Next, Kian turned to Layla, who was looking up at him, tears finally tracing paths through the dust on her cheeks. "Layla of Willow Creek, Kian proclaimed, his voice softening, yet still carrying the weight of the throne. By my royal prerogative, I decree that you shall hold the rank of head healer and personal advisor to the crown. Your power of integrity will guide this kingdom's future. Layla's shock was immense. What followed was the sound of murmuring from the assembled wolves, shock, but no defiance. Kian had made her power official, not ceremonial. By the time the decrees were announced and the stunned council slowly began to disperse, Kian gently guided Layla from the throne room. With every step he took, they walked through a court that no longer saw a commoner, but the king's chosen partner. Chapter 24, Resolution, A Shared Future. The king's private suite felt different now. No longer a cage, it was a home. Kian and Layla returned to the quiet sanctuary, the political storm finally over. Kian gently took the silver locket from Layla's hand. As the wind shifted outside, the locket, cold silver, was placed around her neck. Kian's goal: establish the foundation of their new relationship. Internal state: fulfillment, devotion, and profound peace. It is yours, Layla, Kian murmured, his thumbs tracing the line of the collarbone where the locket rested. Her breath caught as he lowered his head, breathing deeply of her scent, the weak chamomile, the earthy truth, now overlaid with the lingering scent of his own alpha resolve. I chose you, not despite your faint scent, but because of it, Kian whispered. In the stillness that followed, he kissed her, a kiss of shared pain and earned promise. It was not a kiss of political alliance, but of deep, genuine love and commitment. Layla's arms wrapped around his neck, holding on to the man who had risked his crown for her truth. Her soul answered his kiss, melting into the overwhelming safety of his embrace. That night, the scent of power was replaced by the scent of two lonely souls finally finding their anchor. Kian lay in the vast bed, no longer isolated, his hand resting over the small, fragile wolf who was now his true partner. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the political intrigue faded into the background. Kian had found the honesty he craved, and Layla had found her worth. Just like that, everything changed. The king had chosen a new future, built on the strongest foundation of all, unscented truth.